Wonderful to be in a place where, this is the culture that we're creating. This is something that's ours. This is our own red tent. And if we could make it here once a year, then this is a place where we can breathe, we can share our stories, and we can figure out what to do next. You know that yesterday was the 100th anniversary of Mama Harriet Tubman's death. And what a wonderful way, Women's History Month, and what it really means to be able to step out and do what you think is best in spite of whatever else may be going on. I loved the fact that she believed the same thing that we believe, that there is a place for everyone. That what we have to do is honor what everyone has to do and give them that special thing that makes us human, that thing that makes us feel that we have a reason to get up every morning. Because if we don't get up and hold up our part of heaven, it will certainly fall down on us. And what I have tried to do, and one reason that I'm happy to be here at my age, 66 is looking good, don't y'all think? Is that I've tried to channel Miss Tubman, Mama Tubman as I call her, as I've grown into Mama Cat. I can remember when I was the little girl that the last speaker was talking about, and I can remember being a teenage mom, and I can remember living in the bus station in Oakland with my 2 children, and I can remember having an opportunity to go on to UCLA and get my fabulous education. But the thing about my fabulous education that I was lucky enough to get at UCLA is that I was part of the first Economic Opportunities Program class. And it was made very clear to us that those of us, the 300 of us that were accepted into UCLA at that time, the first class, we were there not because we had our A through F requirements or because we were the best and the brightest, but because we were lucky enough to get in. And the education that we got was not our personal education, but it belonged to our communities. And as I've had an opportunity now to try to model, and this has been the hardest part of it really, is trying to figure out how I can stay and work in my own community and not compromise my own values and principles and still be seen as a professional who is credible and has something to offer. So now at this part of my life when I'm looking back on that and looking forward at how we pass the torch to the next generation and seeing how complicated this is, I appreciate this time to actually kind of think out loud about how do we really create an underground railroad. And where we are now and the concept is not a lot different from what it was when Mama Tubman decided, we got to get up out of here. Our communities of color do not have optimum health, and so since I've chosen to be the person who's the culture bearer and the community healer and the mama in the neighborhood, I know the data, but I'm not going to give you anymore because we already know that. We know that from birth through all the stages of life, women of color and their families are more likely to be sick and dying at a higher rate than other women and their families. And we also know that socioeconomic status does not protect us. Some of you know that I was in Atlanta last week, and it was a full spectrum visit for me, from listening to students at Spelman College, which are our best and brightest, to getting a chance to work with Rose and Beautiful Ones to give a community shower to some women who would not have had a shower if the community had not gotten together and done that for them. And really striking to me is that whether you're at Spelman or whether you're in a homeless shelter, you feel overwhelmed with what it's like to be a woman of color in the United States in 2014. We also know that part of the problem is that birth and parenting have become business products. People have always been born, and people have always parented, and people have always been raised. But now we're doing it in a very, very different way, and we're doing it from a very different perspective. And although breastfeeding does not exist in a vacuum and is only a part of the answer to the present-day manifestation of institutionalized racism, it is the foundation for growing healthy people. And little humans usually thrive best on human milk. And one of the things that has happened in our culture is that we tend to wait for experts or the people who are in charge to tell us what to do with ourselves. So Mama Tubman had some options. We could do cultural competence, where you share yours and I'll share mine, but usually it means that I'm sharing me with someone from the outside who's come to help. She could have had a support group to make slavery more something that we could accept, more acceptable. You know, the theory, can't we all just get along? We could have just resorted to burn, baby burn, and some of you remember, you know what it's like to say, oh hell, I'm just gonna burn it down. On the other end of the spectrum, you could just like pray a lot and you could wait for heaven, and it would be okay. Then you could work towards societal change, and Lord knows, I like a good meeting like the rest of us, but you could spend a lot of time in meetings trying to get something done. Or you could do what Mama Harriet Tubman did, you could just start walking. But it's kind of nice to know where you're walking to. So in her time, we were talking about getting from here to Canada. And a lot of people hadn't seen Canada. You know, in fact, Mama Harriet said, I freed a lot of people, but I could have freed a lot more if they'd known they were slaves. But part of that hiding behind being a slave and being okay with it was not exactly knowing where it is you were trying to get to. And sometimes we would rather stay and suffer than go into the unknown. So when we start talking about where is it we're trying to get to right now, we really have to think about, well, what does freedom look like? And if we're talking about breastfeeding, we might be talking about, well, all we want is a healthy baby. When the Birthing Project started off 25 years ago, all we wanted to do was to improve birth outcomes, just to keep babies from dying at such a high rate. But now that we've had an opportunity to do this for a while, and now that I'm an Ashoka Fellow, which means that I don't have to exist just in the United States, and I could look at things from a more global perspective and not just be having the same argument with the same people all the time, I realized that if we had better health, we could create a better healthcare system, but it would also impact our whole education system with how much money that's literally spent because we don't have better health. It would impact our criminal just us system. When you look at the same people that we're talking about who are dying and sick at such disproportionate rates, all we have to do is look at our criminal justice system and see where our babies end up. When we look at our education system and well, just look at the fact of where we are globally in terms of the number of our kids who graduate from high school. You know, when we look at our social service systems, I still am blown away when I think about our whole child abuse system was based and built on the back of a few African American women, I believe, in St. Louis. You know, if we were to become healthy, if we were able to make better choices because we were healthy about our whole lives, just think about how the world would change. A few years ago, I attended the Global Health Conference that was held in Cuba and actually financed by the World Bank Organization. And it never occurred to me the impact that economics has on health. And I found myself the only African American woman in a global health conference that was filled with white men in blue suits talking about the financing of health care, talking about the research around pharmaceuticals, talking about all of that stuff that seems so far removed from a woman of color having the wherewithal to just be able to get her baby off on the right start by being able to breastfeed. So, how do we do this? Well, this is kind of the call to action, and I'm channeling Mama Tubman right now. We make the road while walking. What would a cultural norm inclusive of breastfeeding look like? There are some places where women's breasts are admired for their power and their ability to sustain life. There are some places where it's okay for women to kind of playfully tease each other about the size of their breasts or to touch their breasts within the culture. It's not a medical model. It's a place where women could actually talk about sharing breastfeeding with each other. It's a place where women could learn to breastfeed from each other. It's a place where it's passed down from one generation to the next. But we also need to market as we go. We need to have the same quilts that we have that were the roadmaps from Tennessee to Canada. We need to make our own songs about what it feels like to hold your baby and what it feels like to be a baby. We need to have our own social media around what this is really like, if it's a breastfeeding culture that's really our culture and not someone who's an expert telling us what it should look like, what it should feel like, and how we should translate it to the next generation. We should not, and this is like one of my favorites, is we should be able to tell the story from our own perspective. And I would just like to quickly tell the story of two women. One is my own little sister in the New Orleans Birthing Project. People think because I'm the founder of the Birthing Project, I have a million little sisters, but I don't. But I do have one in New Orleans. And you know, the first time we were funded by Kellogg, we were funded in New Orleans as a food justice project. And I didn't even know what a food desert was until I started working in New Orleans after Katrina. And I damn near starved to death. You know, me, Miss Public Health, I'm really like funny about what I eat. But I found myself eating out of the gas station in New Orleans, eating the fried chicken and the bread that you have to eat before it turns green. And I said I would never do that. But you get hungry enough, you'll eat it. You pray a lot, but you'll eat it. And in our food justice project, one of the things that we were doing is making sure that little children who had not been exposed to vegetables since we don't know when had an opportunity to be exposed to food, good food and comfort food while we were creating happy memories. And at one of the, at a birthday lunch with my baby that was born into the birthing project, it was just me and her mom. We were eating chicken wings and carrots and celery sticks. And her mom looked at me and tears were rolling down her face. And she said, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for having put my daughter in a place where she can eat this. And she said, I know what I'm supposed to do, because everybody tells me I can't eat vegetables because they gag me. I've never had them. But she wanted it for her daughter. And for her, it was almost the same thing as when I looked at my son when he graduated from college and I said, this is one young black man that America didn't eat. It was like he got through. And she felt that same sense of, my daughter has a better chance to make it because she can eat a carrot stick. How often do you get to tell that story in an environment where you can say it with dignity? The other story is last month we were doing a baby shower in the Delta part of Arkansas where my people are from. And as we really talked about breastfeeding, the women at first talked about, well, you know, I'm not sure I can breastfeed because I don't eat well. But as it turned out, it was like, I'm not sure I can breastfeed because I'm a black woman. My hair is not good enough, my skin is not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And remember, we just released the research that shows that little kids, black kids, still choose the white doll. But the pain that these women were talking about was dealing with the fact of how could you be so less than, and you're supposed to have the food of life in your bosom for your baby. You know, where do you get an opportunity to really talk about that and then come up with the part that I hate the most, where people figure out, well, we have to have a policy, we have to have a procedure, we have to have a process, and y'all better not do nothing until we say it's evidence-based. How do you get enough experience in what's in the heart of a woman to be able to go and research it, analyze it, and then decide that this is the only thing that we are going to say is okay to do? You don't get to start walking on the Underground Railroad until we tell you it's okay. So we can't get distracted. We have to stay focused on where it is we're trying to get to, or we'll find ourselves running around trying to please other people so they can give us some money to sustain our organization so we can start the long walk to freedom. And then the thing that this is kind of like a plea. It's like we have to share the resources. Who should get paid to do this work? Everyone should get paid to do this work. When you look at who actually gets in the position to be a lactation counselor and makes $75,000 a year, I get caught up on that. It's like, oh my God, I'd love to have some money. But if we are really all sisters, then we need to see who's missing from the table. You know, we need to see if it's just y'all, then you need to figure out how it can be just us and be inclusive. We need to be our own heroes and sheroes. And when I say inclusive, I mean the Underground Railroad wasn't just made up of the slaves. If other people hadn't decided that we're all in this together, it would not have worked. So even though we're talking about racial equity, we're really talking about the human racial equity and how it's everybody's problem and everyone has to be involved in it. And what would the world look like if this was done? Well, what Ms. Tubman did is she established successful defiance. You know, there is something to be said about not going along with what everyone says is okay. In Ashoka, we say, if you find yourself in a box, you need to get out of it. The Birthing Project has improved birth outcomes, not just in Sacramento or in New Orleans. We're in 7 countries with 5 pending. This is a universal human need and value to love and care for and support each other. And if we do this right, women, babies, and their families will be healthier, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, including the pregnant woman who drove her children into the ocean last week, the women who are pregnant and incarcerated, the women who have to leave their children while they go off to work, the women who do not speak English, even though was not the original language of this land, the ones who know what they are doing and want to do it their way, and we'll be able to see my favorite Cuban PSA on television, which is the one where you see this little, kind of like a mouth and a rosebud opening, and then you see something coming toward the mouth, and as it gets closer, you realize it's a breast, and the breast goes into the mouth, and you hear the baby make this little, That's wonderful. But that's also a culture where from the time a child is born, a child understands that breastfeeding, it's normal. Thank you.